Okay, that's good.
Okay, well, thank you for everybody for showing up tonight for our first Journal Club meeting of the Society of Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest, our first one for 2025. Tonight, we have our own Bryan Bates discussing one of his publications. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Bryan.
Thank you, Chris. So, for those that are listening or otherwise, let's see. Steve, could you hold up the book again?
Oh, sure.
Because I want to reference this. This is the Oxford Five.
Fire?
Thank you. The Oxford Five proceedings called Current Studies in Archaeoastronomy. And I attended that conference along with Greg Munson and several other folks that have been in the society. And so, one of the things I want to share with you is that after I did my presentation, this fella, Steve McCluskey, came up to me and says, Bryan, you did a good job. However, one of the petroglyphs that you showed is not the water clan. And I scratched my head and went, well, okay. And I went back and followed Steve McCluskey's reference to some articles that I think it was Fuchs wrote in the late 1800s and found the sheet where he had different um, pictures, drawings of clan petroglyphs. And sure enough, it said what I looked at, it said it was a sand clan. But then looking through Stevens said that the Sand Clan, if I'm remembering this correctly, it's the Sand Clan and the Water Clan were part of a frailty or fratry.
Hmm.
And so I had gotten my information from Hopi, excuse me, living Hopi people. And what ended up happening, I think, is that those two clans overlapped within this fratry. And that's first a tribute to Steve for straightening me out and yet getting me to dig deeper. And I thank you for that.
Oh, totally forgot that incident. Thank you.
Uh, the picture that you all are looking at is a painting by filmer Kiwanyama, who is a member of our society. Filmer is Hopi, and he has shared quite a bit with me. So some of what I share tonight may come from him. But this is his depiction of the Hopi calendar. And if you will, when you look at this picture, you'll see the Hopi sun god in the middle. And going straight up is the winter solstice. And off to the right hand side is the equinox, spring equinox, the summer solstice, and then the fall equinox. These other lines now are close to the dates of what we call the cross quarter time periods. And what's of interest here is that these are marking periods of time in which there is a transition from men's ceremonies to women's ceremonies. And as such, then, what ends up happening is that we have the men's ceremonies going from late October, early November through until February. And that would be the beginning of the Puamuya. And we're coming up on that very soon. And then it transitions over to the women's ceremonies, which this, I believe, is the Mamzara amongst the Hopi until the May 1st time period. Now, notice I say time period. These are not specific dates because they're set by the movement of the sun and the moon. After the Mamzara, we go back to men's ceremonies. And during this period, we have the men's ceremony that's related to the solstice. which is called Niman. And as we come over to August, early August, then we transition back to women's ceremonies, and they have the Lala Kantu, which is dances and their preparation for winter, going into, it's also a harvest time period. Then we come back to men's ceremony and we go into the Solyelen, which is the winter solstice ceremony. Now, there's a lot of information in here, and I'm not going to go through all of it. And you may see here at the top, there's the sun, there's the moon, and this is two katsinas that have been put together, the Ahole and the Ahaha katsina, and their job is to make sure that the sun follows its appropriate path during the year. So those are two katsinas that are directly related to a number of the Hopi ceremonies, in that they are the ones who guide the sun to make sure it's in its correct place. This is Iatoto, who is one of the Hopi katsinas, and Iatoto is playing the flute or spraying water over plants here, which that begins with the Puwamuya ceremony that I'm going to speak of in a minute. But as we come on around, we come over to this time period in which we have this rainbow from the San Francisco Peaks. This is important because it's the place where Hopi spirits go after someone passes away. And as many of you know, in Hopi society, if one is initiated and follows the Hopi way of life, then their spirit will go to the Katsina, go to the San Francisco Peaks, and there they become a Katsina. There's a women's ceremony in here also. I'm not going to go through all of this, but fundamentally what happens is that this is a marker. This is a depiction of the different ceremonies and different activities of the Hopi. So here, coming into spring, we have the corn plant, and we have down here the kiva. You can see the ladder coming out of the kiva. There's Iatoto again, and Iatoto, as I said before, is going to shepherd the sun. And one of the things that happens is that from the winter solstice to the summer solstice, the Hopi observe sunrise. And from summer solstice to winter solstice, they observe sunset. And oftentimes they would use the San Francisco Peaks for that purpose. As we come across, we come into the snake dance, and now my brain has gone dead because there's another dance that happens in alternate years. But what's happening now is that you're transitioning back from men's ceremonies to women's ceremonies. And according to Barton Wright, there was another ceremony at this time, which has been lost. Barton Wright was the curator of archaeology at the Museum of Northern Arizona and had a very good relationship with the Hopi people. He is one of the primary documenters of Hopi ethnography. But as we come back, we come to the Lala Kantu and the time at which there are weddings. And so the time of Hopi weddings is in the, follows the, the fall equinox. And then that gives way to the men's ceremonies again, and that leads into the Wupatki, which is the time at which all of the males in Hopi go through another learning, another spiritual experience, and they take on new responsibilities within their culture. So I like to start here because this is a wonderful depiction of the Hopi calendar. Now,
Brian, before you move on, we had a question earlier about a term you used, Freitry.
yes,
What that is exactly in terms of a social organization unit?
it's a group of clans that work together, live together, have association, maybe are involved in hosting part of the ceremony together. So
So
it's a
that's,
group of clans.
yeah, so in southeastern Pueblos, it would be like organized as the summer people and the winter people would be a group of clans associated together.
Yes, I agree with you, Greg. Wupatki is located to the northeast of Flagstaff, and I was taken out there by Steve Cinnamon, at that time the cultural resource manager for Wupatki, and he took me to this site. I shared with him my interest in cultural astronomy. He and I were taking classes together at the university, and at any rate, he takes me to this site and he says, there's this wall and we don't know anything about it. And so I said, that's interesting. So I went out and took compass measurements and then theodolite measurements. And what happens is that you have three windows here. So here's the north window that is going to align, as I will show you, with the summer solstice. Here's the middle window, which aligns with the May 1st time period and also the August 6th time period, which would be the time at which you have the transition of men's to women's, from men's to women's ceremonies. And then over here on the far left, you have the opening, the window that goes to the late October, early November, and then the early February time period. And so these are all going to mark time periods that are very important to the Hopi. Now, if I I went behind this wall, and you can just barely see the windows. There's one here, which is hard to see. There's one right there. And then there's another one down here. And the reason I took this picture is look at the horizon. Notice how flat it is? It's very hard to have some scale of how quickly the sunrise is moving across that landscape because there's no references. So what ends up happening is that this wall becomes a reference marker for watching the sun, as well as you could watch the moon from it, but I don't think that was actually what was going on here. This is a picture looking from the east side to the west, and I wish I would have taken it the opposite way, but what happens is it's about 30 inches in length through the window, but about 5 inches across the opening. So what happens is it has a narrow time slot, and you can watch the changing position of the sunrise with this light shadow line, which is going to change as the Earth makes its orbit about the sun. So you can use this for anticipation, which was one of the key points that Mike Zielik had made over and over and really emphasized to me in some of the meetings I attended with him. Well, I was fortunate to stay overnight out here. I had actually a permit from the Park Service. And so I got up early, and this was sunrise through the south window, which would be the October 31st, the October-November time period, and the February time period. And so the sun will soon be coming back into this window as we approach February next week. And that sun is rising right there on February 2nd. If we go to the next window, this is using the same camera, the same film. This is a May 1st photograph. And this then is marking the time that I'm going to speak about in terms of some of the ceremonies. But I want you to think of this now. Imagine that the sun is rising over here and you can track it going across to the center so that you can actually know what time of year it is, and then it will go out. So it takes about 8 days, 8 to 10 days for it to transit across this opening. This is the northern one, and this is taken with a different camera, and this is the summer solstice sunrise. So, and in this case, it takes about 15 days here for the sun to come to the middle of the window. It might be 12 days, but what I'm getting at is that it's, of course, the sun is moving much slower because of the Earth's rotation now crossing over the solstice. And what's interesting is that the sun goes to the center of the window and then it turns around. It never goes to the far side of the window. Now, what ends up happening is that this site was likely occupied by the water clan, the sand clan, and potentially other clans. And so this south window here is marking the time at which you have the Puwamuya ceremony. And the timing of this, of my presenting to you, is fortuitous because the Hopi will be going into the kivas to plant their seeds in the kiva. They will then water those seeds. They keep a fire burning, and that fire burning not only provides heat, but also light. So what happens is that you have the growth, the return of spring, a rejuvenation of life, if you will, beginning in the kiva here in February. It's my understanding from some Hopi people that the plants that are used, that are grown there in the kiva during the Puwamoyas go and are given to people to then plant in their fields or to take home and take care of. But this is the beginning of their anticipation of agriculture, of farming. Now, if I go to the next window, that's this one right here. This is the larger of the window, and this is a time period of May, early May. And what happens now is that, of course, the sun is coming up, it's warming the soils. So what's happening is, if you imagine the soils, the landscape behind you, that ground now is now warming such that the seeds can begin to germinate. Because seeds won't germinate in frozen soil or very, very cold soil. So this, I believe, is an anticipation of planting. It's not that they're planting at this time, but rather that they're preparing to plant. Finally, we come over to this window, which is the time of the summer solstice. And the sun, of course, rises in that window, stays right in the center of it, as I'm pointing with my, as you may see the pointer. And what will happen is that the Hopi will announce the summer solstice ceremony in the kiva after the sun moves back. Now, if you stop and think about some of our important religious ceremonies, such as Christmas, what happens is the sun moves to the south, and around December 17th, it stops. Well, moving south from the naked eye. Well, what's the what's the winter solstice? December 21st. And what happens 4 days later? Christmas. And Christmas was marked as the date at which the light returns. So there's a real correlation here between our Christian ceremonies and the methodology, is what I should say, the methodology used to predict these different times of ceremonies. Now, I want to point out one thing in the background, and that's the San Francisco Peaks. And many of you are familiar that Alexander Stevens has a drawing of the San Francisco Peaks in his book, and that he is actually marking the movement of the sun across that horizon, across the San Francisco Peaks. And so this itself is a very sacred place to the Hopi. And I will mention very quickly that there is a ski area on the opposite side, which uses reclaimed water. And the Hopi and I think 11 other native tribes took their case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, saying that it's desecrating their sacred peaks, their place at which, for the Hopi, where the spirits will return as Katsinas. And in fact, that brings me to another point. As I said earlier, when the Hopi die, these are people that have gone through their initiations, then they will, their souls, so to speak, will go to the San Francisco Peaks. It may be that they go to another high mountain. For example, some Hopi have told me that if you are closer to Navajo Mountain, your soul may have gone to Navajo Mountain instead. And that's up by the Utah-Arizona border. Well, what happens then is that the announcement in the Kiva for when to prepare and host the Neman ceremony comes on June 25th, June 26th, that time frame. And you have then several days of preparation, followed by the beginning of the Neman ceremony. And at the same time period, we often have our first rains. So it's, from what I've read, what's happening is that the Hopis now are using this as a marker for when to begin their Neman ceremony to bring the rains back, and the rains are brought by the Katsinas. Any questions before I move on?
Yeah, a couple I think we have. First of all, I think, from this picture shows really good. You've documented these openings to have not been altered, right? Because I know
that is correct.
There's another site around here that got very popular for this subject, but it was later determined they were stabilized into existence.
That was my question. Yeah, thanks.
Well, let me share with you that following my work here, and I have not published this, another chap and I went over and measured a site at a different location there at Wupatki. And in fact, it's Wukoki. And what we found was that there was a wall, and sure enough, there were some alignments in that wall that had opening windows like this. Well, what do you got to do when you do this research? You got to go back through the archives. And looking through the archives, Jerry Snow found an article that said that Roland Reichert had been one of the people who reconstructed this building. So he went back and met with Roland Reichert, and Roland says, "Oh, we just put those windows in because we needed some drainage. We needed to have some way to get the water out of the plaza." had nothing to do with astronomy.
An
And
important
yet,
lesson.
by pure coincidence, there were sections that aligned with different astronomical, the solstice and cross quarter days. What else, Greg?
The other thing I wanted to mention is just kind of a personal anecdote. You mentioned that the beans are sprouted in the kiva Puamui time, and I've been in kivas in Puamui time, and the bean sprouts. I know one of the things they do with them is give them to people. This is the cold February, and they make a dish called haj, which is a bean sprout soup kind of a thing, and so that's one of the things they do with that. And I know Jason had a question. Jason can unmute and ask your question.
Oh, okay. Yep. I was just wondering if those you mentioned you identifying the correlations between like the Christian calendar and the traditional celebrations, and I wondered if you're saying those are those syncretized, or is it I mean, obviously, contemporary traditions are probably have some syncretization and influence. But I wonder where, yeah, that's my question. How does that play in?
Well, I would suggest that humans, and not only humans, but lots of animals and plants have been following the movement of the sun as the Earth orbits the sun.
Right.
So we've been watching, life has evolved with this pattern. And so what I'm saying is that I think it's coincidental that, Christmas amongst our culture occurs at the winter solstice time,
right,
when the sun begins to move back. But that's a human observation.
right.
And I think you'll find it in China. You'll find it in South America. You'll find it wherever you go. I bet they're in Japan. If you get into the cultural astronomy of Japan, you'll probably find something in which the people of Japan are marking the movement of the sun across their horizon, or perhaps the ocean.
Right.
If I
Yeah.
can interject, Brian, real quick, I wouldn't say it's coincidental. Of course, it's set. The day of Christmas was set to coincide with Yule or winter solstice, much the same way as the February 2nd date coming up was originally in Ireland, Imbolc, which was a ancient festival with ewe lactation, which was usurped as St. Bridget's Day, which later became Candlemas in the Catholic Church, which the Germans then used to watch hibernating bears, which translated to my state of Pennsylvania as Groundhog Day.
Yep.
So it's not coincidence. It's
No, it's not coincidence. It's
Well, okay.
significant solar stations.
Yeah, and what I meant by that is that, humans around the world, and I believe other life forms, are watching this pattern, and they notice when there is a change in the pattern, and that's what's being marked.
Right.
So coincidental may be the wrong term. What I should have maybe said is that it's
superimposed.
Well, so there are foundational cultural astronomy elements that are observed pretty commonly throughout the world.
Yes.
Solstices, equinoxes, these changing times are pivotal and very significant to the people, and they create their calendars and mark their time accordingly and celebrate those times. I guess I was just because you mentioned that correlation. I just wanted to clarify that wasn't like you didn't identify, like there wasn't ethnography that was identifying specific syncretizations around those, just that they are acknowledging the similarities, right?
Right.
Right.
I think there's another point to this, in that in order to survive, you got to be very aware of your environment. So at what points in time do you go from warm weather to cold weather? And by the way, the Navajo, I'm off track here with the Hopi, but the Navajo mark the beginning of winter as the point in time at which there is a significant change in temperature. That could be in October, it could be in November. It's not a singular date.
Right.
It's an event. Others, ethnobotany is a big field, and what ends up happening is that people are watching, when do the leaves begin to come out? When do the flowers come out? When do we begin to get berries? When is the right time to pick the berries? So I think that our watching the sun is in tandem with our watching differences in plant and animal behavior.
Right.
That makes sense to you? How do you know when to plant? If you plant too early, here in the Flagstaff region, you'll get a snow and you'll lose your crop. If you plant too late, you'll get a freeze in late September, and again, you'll lose your crop.
And it's
So,
you can't plant based on the position of the sun, otherwise you won't eat. You got to do it by the natural signs. When is the soil the right temperature? When does these plants come up and things like that? So, okay,
and what I'm saying is that we as humans have done both,
yes.
and I think
Oh, we
animals
do
as
both.
well. When is our hunting season now? It's during the time of mating, the rut. Why? Males are a bit more distracted at that time. They got their eyes on something else, right? And therefore, it's easier to get to those animals in order to kill them and have venison or elk steak for dinner. I digress.
Yes, let's move on.
The other point I'd like to make, though, Brian, it's that I think this is very compelling evidence. I'm reminded of Ruggles' warnings, though, of use of the term equinox as cultural astronomers, because it's such a a Western centric concept of the equinox, and then how Ivan Sprites and others have pushed us to use a quarter day. Cultures such as the Maya that were actually counting days, between solstices to come up with that marker. I'm wondering what your thoughts are here. Do you think that's just an extension of that? Because pinpointing the solstices is no easy task. So counting between them, is no easy task, I would think. And then extrapolating that to a cross quarter day, and the evidence, the photographic evidence you showed here is pretty compelling. That it's right on those days or nearby. I mean,
Yes.
thoughts?
And so, Chris, what I would say is that we're actually looking at regions of time, a week, 10 days. And okay, it hits on what we're calling the cross quarter days. Well, that's when I took the pictures. Okay. And
Right. That's a good point.
And what I'm really getting at is that, what's happening is that humans are watching how their environment changes throughout the year. When's the best time to plant? When's the best time to hunt? When's the best time to gather seeds or gather berries? And so we cannot take we can't, in cultural astronomy, we can't just rely on the astronomy. We need to look at what's the environment that people are in. And I think that's one of the beauties of what Greg and Rick and other folks are doing at Escalante and, with the landscape observing, the cultural landscape project. You know what we're talking about, Chris?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And
Later on that. Yeah.
a lot of the ceremonies that you're talking about tonight, a lot of them were timed both to the sun and moon, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So perhaps they used the moon to let them know when to approach these windows. That could have been a, you know,
Well, I will share with you that others have shared with me that, and these are Hopis, that their ceremonies often begin with the first crescent of a new moon.
mhm.
Or maybe that's when they are originally, start to fire in the kiva or whatever it is. So it's, how shall I say this? I think it's just fascinating that our species, and I think all of life, have been observing these patterns over and over and over and over, and they've been documented for thousands of years. And now what we're beginning to see is, or what I'm beginning to see, is that it's actually about observation of nature. It's not just astronomy, but it's also observing what's happening within their own ecosystem.
Right. To Greg's earlier point, and a lot of my work is with the Maya. The Maya certainly didn't need priests to tell them when to plant, right?
No.
Right.
That was just a reinforcement. Um,
Social constructs.
yeah.
And we'll get off on the Maya some other time. And Chris, I'd love for you to do a presentation when I can get my friend Geronimo Vasquez, who is a very well-informed Maya. He is Mayan, and he
Sure,
knows
yeah.
his calendars. So
Anyway,
Yeah, we need to, I don't know how much more
let's
you got left,
keep
Bryan.
going.
I got to keep going. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night.
Yeah.
Okay. So this, I told the story earlier of Steve McCluskey saying, well, Bryan, that's not the water clan. And so this petroglyph is on the east end of the mesa where this wall is. And so it gives us an idea that it may have been the Sand Clan, or at least the Fraidae, the fratry of Water Clan, Sand Clan, and others. So this is on a day in which there's no sun that's falling on it. It's probably, I don't know, I can't remember exactly when. But now what happens is that this picture right here, this is the winter solstice, the sunrise. So I'm out there. It was a nice chilly morning. And this is the sunrise at winter solstice. And you have to imagine a cliff that's coming out from this wall that is not in the picture, that is then casting that light shadow effect. Well, what's happening, I think, is that in the Hopi society, responsibilities are passed to different societies, different clans or fratres throughout the year. So in our system, in our government, we have, a president for 4 years, and then we elect people at specific times. In Hopi, my understanding is that they pass responsibility for certain events throughout their entire population. The Sun Clan and the Bear Clan are the ones who mark the winter solstice, who initiate and carry out the Soyellen. There were no people from the Soyellen. Well, there may have been. I don't know that, but there were. There's no known Sun and Bear Clan here, but there were Sun and Bear Clan in the Grand Canyon, where there is a marker that I've documented. So the point I'm getting at is that these people were incredibly adaptive, and they were able to live as a community working with each other. Now, this is a kiva that was, I don't remember when it was excavated, but it was excavated by the founder of the Museum of Northern Arizona. And based upon the artifacts in it, he said, yes, this is a kiva. Now, in the western side of, amongst the Hopi and so forth, their kivas are square. If you go over to a lot of the other Pueblans, their kivas are round. It's an architectural adaptation. Well, this kiva is immediately below where the wall that I showed you with the 3 portals is. And there is a trail that you can take. You come out of the kiva and you zigzag back and forth, and you're up on top of this mesa. My guess, and I mean that literally, my guess is that the people who were watching the sun through the portals that I showed you earlier would come here, and this was part of their ceremonial space. It was probably where they slept, and then would get up early in the morning to go watch the sunrise through those one of those windows, depending on what date they were there. But this, I think, really gives.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got it going.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah.
We got you.
Okay, Joe, if you could mute yourself, please.
Well, anyway, yeah,
Do you have a question?
you can do that.
So
Go ahead.
this, I believe, adds to this aspect of religion, this aspect of ceremony, and having some sense of place within the natural world. Okay. This is a picture that was taken in 1910 by Edward Curtis, and many of you know him as the photographer who did an incredible job of documenting Native Americans all across the U.S. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to him. And I put it in here to remind myself to share with you that cultural astronomy is more about culture than it is astronomy. In my work, I've found, finding alignments or, negating alignments is a lot easier than understanding what's the cultural context of that site. And so I think it's absolutely critical, and this is one of the things that I will present at the Hornado conference in July, is that we've got to understand what information is being derived by observing the movement of the sun, the moon, the stars, and how is that information being used within the culture. So I think our job is more as cultural learners than as astronomers. Joe, I saw your hand go up.
No, I think he's talking to a friend. I muted you, Joe. That's why we can't hear you, because we were getting your conversations. So can you unmute yourself if you had a question?
Okay.
Go ahead, Brad. Yeah.
What I want to come back to is that this is a different site. My perception of this site at Wupatki is that it's a hierophany. And many of you know what I'm talking about. It comes from Iliad. And that is that, the light reveals itself. And so, that's a paraphrase. But I think that what we often are doing in cultural astronomy is trying to understand the observations of the sky and then how those observations were used to help that culture survive and how it was used within their ceremonial cycle. And with that, I will take questions. And if you want to know more, I can go to another site that I've researched that's next in this series that I have. So any questions?
I have one question that just it's kind of really tangential and off the beaten track. On the first image you showed with your friend's artwork, the Hope calendar, and this is totally uh off. But my question is the repeating motif of like the you see the blue thing uh with the hanging off the blue line with the semicircle that looks like it's full of stars.
Right here?
Yeah, below it.
Oh, this?
No, the to the left,
To the left.
where the
Right
snake's
here?
coming up. Yeah, right there. So
Yeah.
if you see that, there's a red one on the other side.
Ye-
There's a black one at the bottom of the corn husk. There's one on the very top left. Uh, does that iconography have any special meaning? There's one at the edge of the rainbow coming off of the San Francisco mountains.
Okay, I'm trying to see. You're speaking of
Yep,
this.
yep, the blue, it's almost like a half cross.
Yeah. Are you talking
Yep.
about the color or are the geometry?
I'm talking about the geometry. You see it's at the bottom of the corn stalk in the lower right in
Yeah,
black.
right here.
Yeah, it's at the end of the rainbow that's coming out of the San Francisco mountains on the other
Hmm.
side of the rainbow. And it's just below that. Is that
Oh, right
iconography?
here.
Yeah, there's one, but there's one just up north, up from that. Yeah, if you follow that rainbow to the end,
Oh, okay.
and then at the very top left corner, there's another one that has tassels.
And that's the rain symbol.
Okay.
That's a symbol for rain. Whether these others are, I don't know. But it's not
It
unusual in Hopi and I think other cultures to see crosses or
Yeah, I was more reminded of the Aztec Kali glyph for house,
I don't know.
and especially since the one seemed to be full of stars, and the other one almost had a rising white disk in it. I was just curious if you knew what that symbolized.
I don't. Anybody
Yeah,
else
like
have comments or questions?
Brian, I was going to ask the wall that we're talking about, is that a standalone structure or is that
It is.
okay.
That's a standalone structure. There is no walls going back behind it. It was not a room. These are rooms here and on each side, and those likely were, there was no pottery found here on this site, which kind of surprised me. There are sites back up here, you can just barely see some here, and there were pottery sherds, and there are, you know, other artifacts that were found there. But down here by this wall, the archaeologists didn't find any pottery. But this is a self-standing wall, and I have recommended to the Wupatki National Monument that this be stabilized. And I don't know if they've ever done it, but I've talked with the superintendent and the cultural resource manager from, you know, several years ago about this needing to be stabilized. Because if I go to, let's see, which picture is it? Right here, you can see it's beginning to crumble.
Yeah.
It's beginning to fall. It's not going to be long, you know, in historic time that this wall is going to fall and we'll lose that window. So,
But this is
That might
where
be
projects like what we do, the photogrammetry, the model building,
mhm.
and all of that for documenting it and the landscape all around it comes into play.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of like a really good example of how we can preserve this kind of stuff. And even if, you know, culturally, it's supposed to go back to the soil and the wind and the dust. So this is one of these things that this is how we could document it, preserve it, and then decisions.
This would be an ideal, easy site for our cultural landscape project.
Yep, it would be. Yeah.
Oh, it would be. And easily done if we could get the permits to do it, which we might be able to.
Park Service is a little more tough to do.
Yes, but if I know the right strings to pull.
If you could do that, I could try to maybe pull some of the connections I have to bring in a Faro laser scanner as well as the photogrammetry.
Nice.
That's
Okay.
right. Those are getting really actually easier to work with. Yes. Okay.
You'll have to remind me of that. I'm not committing that I'll do it. I'm just saying that I know the people. Okay?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Hey, Brian, can I
yeah,
ask a question?
sure.
And actually, more importantly, would you mind if I share my screen?
No, go. Let me stop share.
So let me see how it is. So this is a Google Earth. I think everybody can see it. So this is what I know is Kraken Rock.
That is
And I have
Kraken.
actually sort of dealt with this wall right here,
Uh-huh.
which sort of does the same thing. But this wall was rebuilt, so I'm not speaking to the
Yeah, that's the one that
veracity,
was
but
rebuilt, yeah.
I have.
Okay.
But so, and then this is what I know as Kraken Rock Mesa. This is what I know as Middle Mesa, and I think the petroglyphs are kind of like this right here, if I remember right. Is that correct? Do I
Okay,
have that
so
right?
the wall is right in this area right here.
Oh, you'll have to sort of describe to me. So we can't see your
Oh,
cursor.
well,
so.
where your hand is,
Yeah.
if you move to the right in that area, there's the wall just below your hand. Can you see? Okay, bring your hand
This one
over.
here?
Is that it?
Got it right there.
That's it. I think you were just on it right there.
That's
This
it
one?
right there. Yeah.
And the kiva is directly to the right-hand side. I'm sorry, directly down. I said right. I should have said down. So the kiva's, it's actually off the cliff. In fact,
So I went on a trip where I sort of went with a group and I sort of got permission to go and all this stuff. And they let me in here. The trip led us as a group up to the top of Kraken Rock, which is
Right.
why I was able to take images and do this one. But
Right.
on that trip, I wasn't able to get up here, but I've always wanted to get to the top of this mesa. So,
right.
so it seems like.
Well,
But I
Stan
want- you
Plum did the original work on the wall that you were at with Kraken Rock.
This one here? Yeah.
Yes. And
But this looks like it might have been part of a room, but are these individual walls without a room attached? Because this is definitely a room block
I can see
over
the
here.
outline.
okay. Yes, that is a wall that is a standalone, but it
This one?
was reconstructed by Roland Reichert,
Okay.
the chap that I talked about before.
Yeah.
And his notes on that are, well, he doesn't say whether or not and I'm calling this from memory, I don't believe he says whether those openings were there or not when he rebuilt it.
Okay.
In other words, did he rebuild it with?
In this case, there's about 7 openings in this wall.
Yes.
And only one of them I could find actually went to a horizon. Most of them pointed
That is
down
correct.
into the sort of the valley below. only
Yeah.
one actually revealed horizon, and it was
Because Stan and I had a conversation about this. He was thinking that, well, there's that one window, that's an astronomical window. And I go, wait a minute. Where's why do you have 7 windows and only one of them?
yeah, exactly.
And so he and I had, golly, I forget which conference it was, but it was one of the, when we were the conference for Archaeoastronomy of the American Southwest.
I'll tell you what, though, I support this idea. I was thinking about it today when I was reading your paper. This would be great to drone these things. I mean, just do a digital elevation model with high detail of all of these mesa tops. I think that would be really super cool.
Not going to happen.
Well, Horseshoe Mesa is where he runs the Drew Purcell. That's where his site is.
Okay.
The petroglyphs that he documented and shared with us at one of our conferences, and then we published his paper.
It's a beautiful area. There's just like these little mesas. There's here, here,
Oh, yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And then the little Colorado River is just here. In fact,
and there are a lot of sites, a huge number of sites that are down by the Little Colorado. And some of them are on Navajo land, some of them are on national monument.
A lot of this is also private land. The Babbitt Ranch is there.
The Babbitt Ranch is out there. And in fact, that whole complex of Kraken Rock, that had been Babbitt property, and they donated it to Wupatki National Monument.
If I remember, you can see from the map, there's like this little arm that comes up, captures all of these on the.
It is.
The rest of the monument is down here.
And that
this
arm
is still Babbitt land between the river and the thing. So.
If you will go in a bit closer. Oh, you see the lava fall? Go up by the lava. Keep going up. That region above the lava, you can almost see a line running off the lava. It's like a geologic line. That's actually a human created. If you go up and a little bit to your right, slow down to your right, a little more, come off of the black and stop.
There. Yep, I see it.
Okay. I've been out there with Scott Thibany 2 or 3 times, and I'm pretty sure that I believe is Navajo Nation.
I think Navajo's on the other side of the river, I think, but I might be wrong.
I'd have to go back and look at the geographic maps. It could be you have to go across the Navajo Nation to get to it. I know that, but at any rate,
I think this is reservation land on this side over here.
No, but at any rate, I've been out there. We had to go across Navajo land in order to get out there.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we went through a fence, and at that point, I don't know if we were on Babbitt land or Navajo Nation.
It's hard to get to. This is not an easy place to.
Oh no, it's a challenge, and you need high clearance 4-wheel drive.
Yeah, and well, we walked it from sort of one of the other rooms in the main part of the park. So it was 10-mile walk though. So.
At any rate, Scott has documented a couple of sites that he thinks are aligned with the winter solstice out there. And I don't know, he's published them, but I don't know where he's published them.
Great stuff. Okay, I stopped sharing. I just wanted to sort of add.
Okay.
Stop.
A little view here.
Stop your sharing there. So I guess there are no more questions for Bryan on his. So let's try and wrap this up. But I wanted to make an announcement to wrap this meeting up.
Well, before you do,
okay.
Greg.
Yes.
May I interrupt, please?
Sure, of course.
I'm wondering if Steve McCluskey has any insights that he'd go, what the hell are you talking about? Steve, if you'll turn your
mic
you're
back
muted.
I was laughing just a moment ago when you asked me. You missed my laugh. What could I say? The one thing that I've been doing a lot lately when I've been playing around with things Hopi at a distance is that I've been using one of my favorite tools. Any of you guys lucky enough to buy a copy of the Hopi Dictionary?
Not yet.
Oh, by Eckhart Malatke?
No, the dictionary, the University of Arizona dictionary.
I don't know of that.
Oh my God. Well, it's okay. I have to tell you. Let me tell you a story. I bought one at Humalaby State Park gift shop for about 95 or $100 about 20 years ago. The last time I looked, they were selling for 3,000.
That's why I didn't buy it.
Yeah, that's it's no longer available essentially. But the reason I mentioned it, I've been using the dictionary as a tool to find out if there's a concept that we're talking about that the Hopi have. Do they have a word for it? Is there a word for it in the dictionary that you can find?
Uh-huh.
And there are names for the solstitial directions, the 4 solstitial directions. Those are named. There are not names for the directions we call north, south, east, and west. Those are not named. Those aren't Hopi concepts.
Right.
There's implicitly there's names for the solstice in the terms of the directions and the sun's house at the solstice at those directions. There aren't names for the equinox. So that becomes a very powerful tool to sort out if you've got an idea that the Hopi are using a concept. Digging for a name for it is a way to find out whether or not that concept made its way into the language, into the Hopi culture deeply enough to develop a word of its own. Of course, there's the other thing. The fact that the Hopi have a word for it doesn't mean it's necessarily Hopi. The Hopi have a word for typewriter. Nope. The Hopi have a word for cow, which is Spanish. Nope. So you get to, it's tricky to find out whether even Hopi words indicate a long-running Hopi familiarity with this going back into the origins of the culture. But at least it's a toy to play with, and I've been having fun with it.
Well, good.
I
I'm not
I
sure I'm going to buy the Hopi Dictionary.
I like that technique. I think it's a good one. I've done the same thing with Ute. Mountain Ute has an app actually that you can download for quick reference. And I do the same thing. Like, is there a cultural context for it? And also your point, I appreciate that too. If it's been able to, it's not necessarily an indicator of like traditional culture, but if it's made its way into, the contemporary speaking of it, that's pretty interesting on its own. Yeah.
The Hopi Dictionary, I have to say, it's been, I've got some reviews of it.
Hello, little Woo.
Hello,
Bryce, we can hear you.
And it's been reviewed as being the best dictionary of any Native American language, period. So it's a mind-blowing thing. And somebody mentioned Malatke with it. Malatke was one of the editors of it. Hill, I've forgotten his first name. Kenneth Hill was one of the other, and Emery Sekakopta was one of the other people involved in that dictionary project. But if you can probably find it in one of the better university libraries. I bet NAU must have it. The Museum of Northern Arizona must have it. And there's a place where you can use one, at least if you can't get one yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to take a class from Emory when I was at U of A.
Emory Sakoptua?
Yeah, one of the compilers of the dictionary.
Yeah, I met him once when I was on my way out to Hopi country, and I was down at U of A, and someone said, and I went to visit him, and he gave me some advice on people to see and people to do, and it helped a lot back in the days around 1980.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Oh, well, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, and to kind of just wrap this up, I just wanted to make an announcement about something that happened recently. The Society for Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest just received word that we have received a grant from Colorado State Historical Fund, 15,000 grant to do the archaeological assessment on Jackson's Castle and Canyon of the Ancients National Monument. And there's Mary. Mary just joined. So we got the grant and permit, and this is a really big step forward for our society and cultural astronomy in the American Southwest. So it's going to be a big thing. Yeah. First time, I think, any kind of cultural astronomy nonprofit organization has gotten their own grant and permits to do this kind of work. Hey, Mary. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Hear you now. Mary Wupatki.
Right.
She's for the Jackson's Castle project. She's the project archaeologist. So I am very proud to have her on our crew and our group.
Thank you, Mary.
It's all pretty much her fault anyway, so.
It's not my fault. I am
Yes, it
in,
is.
yeah, I'm in San Antonio,
Really? You get around.
and there's snow on the palm trees here.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Can you believe that?
Yep.
It's wild.
You had to go somewhere.
Mary, I'm in Flagstaff at over 7,000 feet, and we have no snow.
Oh man, you want
Haven't.
some? It's wild.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and we can keep chatting.
Okay.
Yeah, Mary, you got here just in time for the end.
Oh man. Okay.